Tzoharaim Tovim. I'm reminded this week of the famous legend in the Talmud that describes Pharaoh gathering his three famous non-Jewish advisors to discuss what to do with the Jews. The first advisor was Bilam ben Beor, who we're going to see later in the Torah tries to curse the Israelites. The Talmud teaches us that Bilam was Pharaoh's yes man, and so he told Pharaoh to go ahead and kill the Israelites. The second advisor we see was Job, who later in the Bible suffered for his silence. In characteristic Job fashion, he chose to stay silent and was made to suffer later on. The third advisor was Yitro, the father-in-law of Moses, the priest of Midian. The Talmud teaches us that Yitro ran away from Pharaoh, which is why he merited later on his descendants being priests in the temple of Jerusalem. At first, you might say it would appear that all voices seem to be represented in the cabinet of Pharaoh. However, as we read through Parashat Bo and we see Pharaoh continue to falter, I'm reminded that there was one other voice that was missing from his cabinet. There was no voice of an advisor who was willing to stand up and to tell him that he was mistaken. Why is it that Pharaoh, time after time in our parasha, continues to harden his heart, leading to his failure? The Midrash reminds us that it is simply because there was no one in Pharaoh's inner circle who had the courage to stand up and to challenge him to think differently. Some of you may know that a few years ago, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin famously wrote a book called Team of Rivals. It was the story of Abraham Lincoln and his heroic strategy as president not to assemble a cabinet of like-minded individuals, but rather Lincoln chose to assemble a group of people who all thought they deserved to be president more than he did. Through Lincoln's courage of not being afraid to engage with people who thought differently, Lincoln saved our country and put us on a path towards stability and coming back together. This week, yesterday, over 150 years after Lincoln assembled his team of rivals, our country came together to inaugurate its new president. Some of you may know that my uncle Ralph, who was at my installation at Congregation Eitz Chaim, was serving as the president of Congregation Beth Shalom in Wilmington, Delaware. In that capacity, he had the privilege of introducing then Vice President Biden at a synagogue event. After which, in a moment of great humility, the vice president told the community that he wanted to introduce someone of so much higher importance, the president, Ralph Downard of Congregation Beth Shalom. Needless to say, I think we all know that our country has now hit a crossroads. So much has happened over the last several weeks. And yet, just as when President Trump was elected, as when President Obama was elected, I believe that our response this week must be the same whenever we have a new president, to wish our new president good health and success in all of their worthy endeavors on behalf of the American people. However, as we read the Torah portion this Shabbat, there is but one lesson, if I could in all humility pass on to a man who has dedicated his entire life to public service, from one who is just beginning his life in public service. That lesson would be this: a reminder that our parasha teaches that the most successful leaders have always had different voices at the table, to be inclusive, to challenge, to sharpen, and yes, to compromise. It is the way of the Talmud itself that we have sages disagree with one another all of the time, if only just to strengthen their own arguments and positions. America is a nation, just as we are a synagogue family of many, many different voices. But in the end, we will all win together when we commit to listening to one another, when we learn not to be afraid to disagree respectfully, and when we hear new and different ideas. According to our parasha, that is why Pharaoh failed. But it is where I pray and remain hopeful that our new president, just inaugurated, may succeed. This has been my first segment of 2-Minute Torah from Congregation Eitz Chaim in Marietta, Georgia. I hope that if you like this segment, you'll share it with your friends. I want to wish all of you a peaceful and restful Shabbat.